It's a great joy to welcome Becca Stevens to YDS. We've had a good start to a class, a 2-day class, and we're very grateful that you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
Becca is an Episcopal priest who is chaplain at Vanderbilt University as kind of a day job. But really what you have done is you are the president and founder of Thistle Farms, an amazing community of social enterprise, of social justice enterprise, of housing for women who are in vulnerable places in their lives and seeking and finding strength. And it's a project that has grown well beyond Nashville, and we'll hear about that tonight. Welcome. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for coming. It is cold and dark, and it sounded like there was a cat outside the window when we were doing class. The wind sounded just like a cat. So just for y'all to be here is so nice, and I'm getting to see a few old friends, and I'm so grateful for that. Do you want me to introduce the video real quick?
Yeah, let's start with the video.
So we wanted to start with a video real quick, and that's because the video was supposed to come out today. It's actually now not coming out till early next week. So this is a sneak peek video. And when I heard I was coming up here on the day it was coming out, I was asking Bill if it was okay if we showed it, because it's kind of the culmination of about 26 years of work. So I started Thistle Farms in 1997. I had a 4-year-old, I had a 4-year-old, but I had a 6-year-old child at the time, and he grew up loving and knowing all the women at Thistle Farms, being partly raised by many of the women. He, like his daddy, my husband, who is a country music singer-songwriter, they got together about a month ago, and you know, the mantra of Thistle Farms is Love Heals. It's the name of the book that we wrote, and they finally wrote a song called Love Heals. And then my son, our son, Levi Hummin, recorded it, and now, and then about, 3-4 weeks ago, he and Allison Krauss did a duet of it. And so this is Levi Hummin and Allison Krauss's duet. You can hear her singing background for him and exchanging the second verse. But it's all the women of Thistle Farms, and many of them who helped raise him are singing along on the song too. So I want to show it to you. Is that all right? Yes. The world premiere of Love Heals. 21 years, Thistle Farms has been a witness to the truth that in the end, love is the most powerful force for change in the world.
Hay kills, birds fly, rocks roll, tears cry, and love heals. Whiskey burns, records scratch, wheels turn, sparks catch, and love heals. Oh, I've never seen a broken heart, one shattered and torn apart, that could not come back together. And I've never known a life so heavy, couldn't stand on legs unsteady, and one day run light as a feather. Baby, here's a deal. Love heals. Sunsets, sun's rise, all regrets and alibis. Dreamers dream, some dreams come true. We're caught between a hell that's coffee black and heaven that's sky blue. Oh, I've never seen a broken heart, one shattered and torn apart, that could not come back together. Oh, I've never known a life so heavy, couldn't stand legs unsteady, and one day run by as a feather. Baby, here's a deal. Love heals. And everything's shining. One day gets broke. It's some kind of mystery. This much I know. Love heals.
Wow.
Good, right?
That's pretty amazing.
Sweet.
Tell
Isn't
us-
that fun, y'all?
Good, quite a musician, that son. Mm-hmm. Tell us
He's
about
cute,
Love
right?
Heals. He's cute.
Huh? What?
Tell us about Love Heals. Tell us about what's going on there.
You know, I think that for me, Love Heals was a paring down, getting rid of a lot of extra words. Like, you know, we started with a mission statement in 1997 of we want to be a witness to the truth that in the end, love is the most powerful force for change. And it kept getting narrowed and narrowed and narrowed down, and we were left with the two words, love heals. And I think it's probably the simplest and most profound theological statement you can probably make.
When you started, was it just you?
What do you mean?
Was it when you started? How did you build Thistle Farms from this?
Oh, when I started Thistle Farms?
Yeah.
No, not really. I mean, the first thing I think most of us do when we have an idea is we go talk to some friends, right, with money. And that's what I did. So, I mean, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted it to be a community-centered place that was really, really a sanctuary for women. So it wouldn't be a treatment center, it wouldn't be a halfway house, it wouldn't be a religious place, it wouldn't be a shelter, nothing. It would just be a home. Women could come live free for 2 years with no authority in the house. And that model is so old, and it's so simple, and it's really kind of hard to convince people that, like, people don't need babysitters, and you know, it can be free, you know, and all those kinds of things. So friends was a really important part. It's just going to say, I think we should try it. This is a radical hospitality model of love without judgment. Let's go. And some people, you know, especially people I think who had somewhat of a history of brokenness themselves and realized the amazing gift of mercy, joined in and we did it. And so we got to do it without any federal funding, without any state funding, without any, you know, money from anybody except if you wanted to give it in gratitude.
Was there going to be a business piece to it from the start?
You know, I don't remember, because you know how you can remember backwards kind of wrong? I mean, no, I'm serious. Like now I think, no, we had no idea that we were going to do business, but I think I kind of did because I had seen Delancey Street and some other places that had done that. So it wasn't like it was foreign. But I knew that I wanted, once we got going, I knew I wanted to start a business because over 90% of the women were not employed that we were working with. And it seemed crazy that they were doing all that good work and still dirt poor. So it made sense to me that we would start a business. And then it also, because I was like, you know, similar to an environment like this, I was at Vanderbilt University. You know, we had the chapel there. It's a free place to work. And we had a bunch of people who, in my mind, needed bath and body care products. And so it made sense to do it that way.
Uh-huh. For how long was it one house?
Oh, it was not one house very long at all. One of the first 5 women that came in was a woman named Regina, and I talked about her this morning when I was at the worship service. And she was the 5th woman in the house, and she invited somebody else in. And at that point, I had had access to another house, but it didn't have any plumbing, it didn't have any heating. I mean, obviously, we weren't up to codes or anything. And Regina just brought her in, and she was like, Lisa needs a place to stay. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to do about that. She goes, you have a place. I'm like, yeah, but like it's not like legal. And that night, Lisa moved in anyway, and she said that she was watching the house while it was under construction. So the second house started, within at least like a couple months of the first house. But obviously, really the way I believe that movements really grow, especially justice movements, and that's what we're talking about these 2 days. It's almost like you say, like, I'm going to really do it this way. Here's my business model, here's the vision statement, here's the working statement, here's the case study, and then you just break all of that when the need presents itself. It's like, do you take children? No, and then there's a child, and what are you going to do? I think we have to be like that, and then you apologize and move on.
We've been talking in the class, you've been talking in the class about ministry and about justice work. Talk about the balance of those two things, maybe early on and now. What is it that you're doing?
So, I feel like that I have come less to believe in the whole compartmentalizing of ministries. So here's your healing ministry, here's your evangelism ministry, here's your justice ministry, here's this one, here's this one. It's like if you begin, in my mind, this is where I'm coming to, if you begin with justice as your worship, then everything else kind of falls into place. You're practical, you're relevant, you're sustainable, you're scalable, you're all of those things you want in your ministry, really. And it has meaning and depth, and it's a lens through which to read the Gospels. What I say to divinity school students is, if you can't write a sermon, don't go to the library, go to prison. Start there. And the sermon will present itself, or wherever we are. But at least for me, I think it's like there is one sacrament. It is healing, and there may be 7 ways that we look at it, or 3 ways we look at it, 2 big ways, 5 little ways, whatever the lens is. But like really, 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 it's all about healing, and so that means it's all about justice. And if we start with that, and you serve a cup of coffee like a chalice. You build a shelter like a cathedral. You worship, and everything else will fall into place. That's what I've come to believe. I don't always live into it, but I don't always live into what I believe anyway. But that's what I hope to live into.
Did you have to give something up to come to that belief?
Well, you realize I've been ordained 26 years and I'm still a chaplain, right? Can you imagine if you never had moved beyond chaplaincy? It's pretty humbling. I'm not like the university chaplain. Mm-hmm. I'm a chaplain. I'm an Episcopal chaplain, and, I gave up a lot. That's all. I'm just saying that's not like the career path most people who are divinity school students here are thinking about, right? Campus minister for the rest of your life.
Well, maybe a couple.
It's beautiful, it's freeing, and it's wonderful work. I'm just saying that's not what I was thinking about when I started out, but what I realized was the freedom in that to be able to pursue so much other stuff. So the costs are minimal. The costs may be like career moves or weekends. Yeah. Or, No, but there's costs in it, but it's like, I really do think like, what makes me weepy, and I'm saying this to you, and as honestly as way I can, is like I've heard stories, horror stories, universal human trafficking for years. And they're hard stories, and you think, how can humanity do that to each other? Or how could that be possible in this world? And you can get riled up and righteous and refueled for your justice, but what makes me weepy has been how unbelievably kind people have been to us. And all the doors that have opened. And I never would have known that had I not followed this path. And so I just am so grateful. It's like the best to be able to do and live out into your ideals of justice. Like no cost is better than that in the whole world.
In the class, you were inviting us to think a bit about our own gifts in the midst of envisioning work of justice. What are your gifts?
Well, my gifts are definitely, I don't want to say arts and crafts because I feel that that's demeaning. I'm going to say artistic expressions of my theology, but it's really arts and crafts. But where that intersects with justice and enterprise, I can build a business, I can tell a story, and I can bring people together around a cause and get them going on it. And that's my favorite part, is to go like, okay, here's where we are, and here's what we can do, and we can actually do something. We can, if you would all buy our soap, we can save lives. I'm not asking you to radically change your lives, but I'm asking something like that. Like, that would be a really good example. And like, if a group did that, that radically has an impact. And it's crazy, but it's true. And I think I'm good at that.
What are the things you wish you were good at that you're not?
Singing. I really do. Wood turning. And maybe focusing.
In that order, I think, yeah.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I can focus, but I can be unfocused more.
We were going to talk about healing, healing as sacrament, and healing as enterprise. Mm-hmm. What's that mean?
Healing is sacrament or healing is enterprise? Both?
Yeah.
Well, I really think that, for me, what the turnaround in the community of Thistle Farms, and at that point when it was just residential, the turnaround was really thinking that if we're going to talk about love, we have to talk about economy. We have to talk about economic independence. We have to talk about the ability for people to make choices in their lives, all of that stuff. And you cannot do that without having an income and having that independence. And in order to do that, you have to be willing to enter into the marketplace. And I think that's where sometimes the church gets really scared. Church, whether it's individuals or institutions, it's like, I'd love to talk about healing and love, but I don't really want to know what that value is in the marketplace. Like, what's love go for these days? And, the market of love will bear $22 for a candle. It won't bear $25. We learned that. That's an interesting piece of information, and that there is an economy of love, and it's exponential, and it has amazing healing power. So instead of being afraid of it, which I think the church often does, and we get symbolic and we get ritualistic without having that practical economic impact, it's not as healing, right? And por ejemplo, the way that most churches administer healing oils is a great example. Can I give an example? Is that all right? So, we've gotten to the place, back in the day, if you look at the 425 places that oils are described in Scripture, mostly people are pouring oil on each other, on their heads, their feet, their hands, but it's this abundance of oil. And it's beautiful, and there's healing properties in the oil. So we've symbolized it, broken it down now, to where if you're really sick, usually some kind of minister comes by with a tiny bit of oil, and they'll put a drop on your forehead. And it's all about beautiful intention, prayer, body, touch, all that beautiful, beautiful. But, there's no more oil left in it, really. It's all symbolic, and we've forgotten that could be really a part of it. And also, it's just down to these few people who are allowed to touch it, and who are allowed to bless it, and who are allowed to make it. And it'd be almost like saying, you can never eat bread unless it's communion. Right? And so the idea of saying, okay, let's make this abundant healing that is sacramental, but it also has a lot of beautiful implications for how everybody's empowered, and there's a whole venture around it. And so what we've started doing, what if you can think it's crazy, is now there are, 70 women from the streets blending oils that many people buy to heal each other. So no longer do you get one person putting a drop on your head, you're making buckets of it and spreading it out, and you're selling it, and people are feeling, empowered by it and love it and do it in a sacramental way. It's not the exact sacrament maybe of the Episcopal Church of how it's offered, but it is this beautiful sacramental healing that also has implications in the marketplace. That's the best example I can give.
So those 70 women, what do they think about that oil? I mean, it's a job. It pays them. Are they owners, or are they?
It's more than 70 women. I shouldn't have said 70.
Well,
I'm thinking about the 120 women who, a lot of them are making the oils in Rwanda, and then the women who are not just blending the oil, but also shipping the oil. And I mean, there's a lot of different jobs involved in it. But I think that, I think people feel grateful for the oil. I think that would be the word. We used to have these parties where we came together and we would do all these different blends, and that's what we're going to do in the class tomorrow, start blending. And what happens is when people engage in those oils, then it's almost like you have some ownership of it. And so if somebody doesn't like it, you kind of take it personally. You know that feeling, instead of like you're a distant person, it's all of a sudden it's like, you don't like the oils? Why? That's part of my story. That's part of our story. So I think people are grateful to the oil and also a little defensive of it. But that's just one thing. I mean, there's a lot of different examples, whether it's oils or teas or candles. But these beautiful ways that we've taken, what I've tried to do at least, is take these old rituals and bring new relevancy and life into them. Like there's nothing better than having a Thistle Farmers candle on a table that's called an altar, or a welcome mat that the refugees made as an altar cloth. Like taking some of the old things and bringing economic empowerment, bringing meaning, bringing new ritual and depth to it, I think it is healing. At least for me, it's like I wake back up to church, and I can appreciate the old traditional rituals again.
What does the church do with your work? I don't even know what I mean by the church, but your colleagues, the clergy, and do people get it?
I think people have been very, 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 very open to us. I don't know how that works, but it's been awesome. So I wish we were in more denominations or faith groups. It seems like we really latched on well with the midwives. We started having midwife groups that would invite us in. We went to their national conference. I was made an honorary midwife.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? And they bought tons of products. And then there was the Cumberland Presbyterian women invited us into their national conference. And we were like, okay, so we've learned that our perfect customer is a Cumberland Presbyterian midwife. That's the niche. But in the midwives conference, we realized, you just started a story. It was like there was a woman, whose stepdad started raping her at the age of 7, and she ran away. And all the midwives just started crying. And it was like, oh my God, they know. They know the women. They know what happens after that. They know the next part of the story and how hard it is. And it was beautiful, beautiful connection. And so I think when you get in front of a church group or a group of people that can kind of hear the story and get it with you, you can go pretty far. And then other times it's like you can sit in a church group and they want to know, wonder how she feels about immigration. It's like, what? People want to separate or say this is the issue that will divide us, and we can't get past that into community or whatever. And that's, to me, where I've had the biggest problems in churches. My brother is a Roman Catholic priest. He was the president and dean of one of the more conservative Roman Catholic seminaries in America, St. Patrick's in Palo Alto. He's on sabbatical now back in Nashville for a little bit. And he and I are pretty, we enjoy the spectrum of theological thoughts. I mean, for example, one of my greatest examples is like he's so smart and fast and witty, and I'm scared to show him stuff I write or do, and I wrote this one sermon. It was an Easter sermon, right, about resurrection, and I was really proud of it, and I showed it to him, and he took a draw off his filterless Camel cigarette, and he said to me, the job of the church isn't to blow sunshine up people's ass. If that gives you a sense. So I don't mind people disagreeing with me.
Let's light a candle.
Yeah. But I'm saying, and we love each other. There's nobody I'd rather be with. He's awesome. And I think people can be together. And when you're in that environment, you feel it, and it can be funny, and it can be awkward, and you can still move on. But when there's some things that it makes it like, I've been disinvited to church bodies before. I remember I got invited to a conference for the Southern Baptist Women's Convention in downtown Nashville. It was it was young women. That's what it was, like young women's convention. And I was like, sure, we'll come. I'm happy to come. And they want you to keynote. And then about 2 weeks later, they called and disinvited me. And I was like, well, don't worry about it. I was surprised I was invited. But some people don't want you to cross those boundaries, that's all.
Mm-hmm. What do you want to ask? What do you want to know about? Please.
Welcome back to Connecticut, the land of I don't want to impose. So it can be really hard for me to advocate for something that even when I know it's important, when I feel like it's imposing on others, or if I'm asking for something. And I feel like you're really eloquent about how important it is to ask people for what you need, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about that.
So what do you need?
Well, more kindness in the world would be great. I don't know.
You need more kindness in the world. That's the need. And I mean, to me, it seems like you'd be so sad not to ever ask that. And so I think that it's not hard for me to say, here's really what it is that I need. And what I think is really amazing about community like Thistle Farms is that we can ask for each other. And I didn't draw a salary for 20 years from Thistle Farms. I didn't have a problem at all asking people to donate money. I was still making money being a chaplain at Vanderbilt. And it's much easier for me to ask for them, and it's much easier for them to ask for me. And I think that's if you feel uncomfortable about that, to find a community that could help you ask, for kindness and whatever that looks like specifically, and to articulate that would be a huge, huge gift. But I also think, to be a beggar, to ask for things, isn't a bad thing, right? I mean, that's what you do every Sunday morning when you're passing out the plate. You may not say it, but that's what you're asking for. And, that's not bad. That's how the church keeps going, is, it's the virtual passing around the plate. Now it's donate for Kindful or whatever it is. But it's still the ask. And what I think the gift is one is saying, not forgetting that we're also bringing a lot of value. When I'm asking, I am also bringing a lot of value, and I'm bringing a lot of savings. So in other words, if it costs $24 per day for a woman to stay in our community, and it costs $80 a day to stay in prison, I may be asking, but I'm not asking near as much as other people are asking. And the benefit of that has a lot of value. And to not undermine that when we're asking, we're also giving value. And the second thing is to remember that this is a room full of beggars. There's no shame in asking. All these people are asking. And I don't ever want to go to a community that forgets their beggars. And I love the tradition within the Episcopal, well, most traditions, but when you go up to communion, you have to ask. And I love that. It's a good reminder for me.
Should we ask for more? As opposed to a little? Do we ask for enough? We as a society, we as the church?
I don't know how to speak for the society.
Okay. Thistle Farms, do you ask for enough?
No.
Okay. Let's go from there.
Let's go from there.
Yeah.
I can do that. I mean, because I don't know. I mean, I think of, also, I don't think, you know, like gluttony and indulgence and all that. And I don't like a feast without a fast attached to it. So I feel that way. But I also feel like, no, I mean, like that's one of the things I've always felt like is that I started out dreaming so tiny and asking for so little for this community. And then I realized, like, if you ask well for exactly what it is, the vision, dream that we all have is, there's resources. Oh my gosh, you know, like, don't go to Google and ask for 10,000, you nuthead. Which I've done many times. Because I'm like, you know, I need 100, just, you know, like you choke up. And it's like finally going like, okay, we have a beautiful project in Greece. It's going to be $150,000. And speak it. And it's done.
Others.
Have you ever had a moment when you didn't think love could feel it? Did love show up?
I've had moments, and I've written about them in the book, Love Heals. So, yes, is the answer. I've had moments, and then I've never been abandoned by love, though I'll say that. Ever, 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 even in those moments. You know, one of the stories is of the day that my mom went to the hospital. She had Hawkins Crucifield mad cow, and we didn't know what she had. She was getting worse and worse. Went to the hospital, and on the way to the hospital, I had a miscarriage while I was driving her to the hospital. And I thought, okay, this is a bad day. This is really, like, I felt confused and lost. I didn't know if I was supposed to go to the hospital or take her to the hospital. I didn't know what to do. Get up to the hospital room, and my dad, who had died 30 years before in a car accident, was only in Nashville from Connecticut for less than a year. And a woman walks into the hospital room. I'm feeling so sick. My mom is out of her mind. And the woman walks in, and she's looking at the chart, and she says, Ann Stevens, is that Joe Stevens' wife, who was my dad that was killed by a drunk driver? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, oh my gosh, I was a little girl in the house your dad stopped at before he left and was killed by a drunk driver. He saved my parents' marriage. I would love to take care of your mom. Never met her, never heard of her, never heard the whole thing. And I was like, I could walk out of there and go grieve myself and know that she was going to be taken care of for the next few hours. And that was that feeling of like, I am so crazy lost and I'm completely grounded. And I've had many of those moments where if we can just see it and just say, okay, I'm going to keep walking, because love does not abandon us. It does not abandon us. And it's like, even in, you know, a lot of different times, it's like, just stay with it. And it's like, something reminds me that I am love. Yeah.
So I had the great privilege of hearing you last year when you were at Temple Shalom in your local.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I know. Because I told you you were coming.
Oh,
Thank you, by the way. My church is here, and we brought 6 people today because we are so transparent.
oh.
But I would love it if you would tell the geranium story.
Oh. Is that the drop of geranium?
It's the geranium, yeah.
Okay. Well, we passed around geranium oil in the class today, and we were talking about how much fun it is to start new partnerships and say yes to things, and how when you have a communal vision, even though you have no idea how you're going to do it, you can say yes because you know you have, you know, a group committed that can figure out distribution, margins, marketing, labels, you know, and you can just say yes. So we were in Rwanda 2008, met a group of women survivors of the genocide where in 1994, 1 million people were killed in 100 days. And we said, yes, we'll be your North American distributors for these women who were growing not just geranium, but geranium, patchouli, eucalyptus, and lemongrass. And we brought it all back to the States and were real excited, had no idea how you start distributing and blending the geranium oil, had no idea it was a great bug spray. None of that had happened yet. But we were going around and I was talking in prisons to groups of women. I wasn't just talking in churches. I did a whole tour of women's prisons around the U.S. We went to Houston, Texas. It was August, and the Houston prison has no air conditioning. Right? I mean, that should be just say no right there. I mean, like, if we just tell teenagers that. You could go to prison and there's no air conditioning. But we, in Tennessee, our oldest prison had no air conditioning for women. This is just a tip if anybody, rabbi, preacher needs a tip. But so we didn't have any air conditioning. And they started the program where the Humane Society was letting women foster dogs. And in the summer, they were pulling all the dogs out because it was too hot. And so the Tennessee state prisons put air conditioning in so they could keep the dogs. So we're in Houston, and I was getting ready to speak to the group, and it was hot, hot, hot. Old school prison. Guards are on horseback, women long sleeve, long pants, growing turnips. And so between the horse manure and the turnips and the sweat in a room about half the size with about 300 women, we were supposed to be talking about hope in community and how love heals. You're asking about how you feel about that stuff. And we passed around the papers with our 24 spiritual principles of how we all love each other and can do this work together. And the woman on the front row just lays the piece of paper across her face and says, "Oh my God, what is that smell? It smells so good." And we had packed all that geranium without any idea of how to really bottle it or sell it, and it leaked onto the papers. And I was standing there looking at her thinking like, 1 million people in 100 days, massacred, unbelievable. And these women didn't give up. And they're planting something healing and beautiful for the world. And then some of that oil, when we met them, got shipped to the U.S. to another group of women who have all been beaten and raped multiple times and housed in prisons, and left on the short side of justice, on the back side of anger, beaten and brutalized because of poverty and racism and every other thing. And they sit there and stamp love heals on these oils. And then it goes on a plane, and then it makes its way through a prison wall so a drop of oil could land on a piece of paper, and a woman who needed to feel some healing could breathe it in. And if a drop of oil can make that journey, I can add my drop of oil and make an amazing journey too, and you can too. And we can create this beautiful healing way of living together with our small, small drops. And that's my geranium story. That's like the old classics. Yeah.
Could you talk about what a day at Thistle Farms might look like when you're certain people working together or just training?
So just a little bit of structure. Is that all right if I just give a tiny bit of whatever it is? There are 5 houses in Nashville, 5 communities of women in Nashville. There are 47 sister communities around the U.S. So people have, it's an affiliated network, and people pick up that model. And what that means is everybody shares these core principles and this core way of life together, which is housing first model and economic recovery model, those 2 things. So basically, a day in the life, it looks different depending on which community you're in, because they're not all the same, because it's a community. But the gist of it is you come in and you have time to do whatever it is you need to do. If that's rest, if that's meet with people, if that's go see a dentist, if that's to go to the Rape and Crisis Center, if that's to go to treatment, whatever you need to do at the beginning. And then everybody really does a lot of technology training, a lot of life skill classes, some resilience therapy as a group, some PTSD work. Everybody has their individual therapist that they take time with. About 6 months into the program, you start thinking about work. And so you wouldn't come over to Thistle Farms or any other job you chose to get. Nobody has to work, obviously, at Thistle Farms, and everybody gets paid the first hour they're there on. But you have to work or go to school. You have to do something. And people continue on, and you stay doing that. 18 months in, you start an exit plan. You have 6 months to think about what that exit plan looks like and what that next part looks like. One of our most difficult parts of the whole program is figuring out after housing, especially for people with a lot of felonies on their record. It's pretty impossible. And so we've started renting like triplexes in our name and then subleasing them to graduates has been one way. Some graduates are able to buy houses, some people get apartments, some people do whatever, but really so that the program is broken up. We used to really call it was like postulant, candidate, novitiate, and then sister for life. And now we just say, beginning, middle, sister for life, because it was pretty confusing.
Here too.
Yeah. Go ahead.
How do women find you, and how are they able to live their life? How do they get there?
That's a good question. How do women find us and how do they get there? We have a cap on our waiting list of 100 women. So we say no every day to women. If you have something like when we did the CNN Hero thing at the end of last year, a year ago, we had more referrals than we ever had donations or people buying products. So all that stuff is a curse and a blessing as far as like when you were talking about managing expectations, it's like we have this amazing, amazing place to come live and everybody's like, we want to come live, and it's like, you can't. I mean, that's really hard, and that's why we're putting so much effort into the national network and really trying to open up a lot of different houses all over the country so that there's communities all over the country, and we can actually refer and move women around that need to be moved around. They get there. I mean, people can come on bus, on plane, on car, right out of the prison door in Nashville. A friend drove... one of the women that works in the cafe, she jumped in a friend's car that was coming from Detroit and just said, I know of this place called Thistle Farms, I have to go. She jumped in the car and just went. She had no idea if she could get in. She had no idea anything. Isn't that crazy? We've had women who have been referred by counselors who have read something about us, or, anybody refers. But the problem for us, is that there's thousands and thousands of women who qualify and hundreds of beds. So that's why we got to keep growing it. Yeah. And it's different. Again, every house is really different. So the houses are the houses, and people fit in differently in different communities and how they want. There's 3 houses in Northwest Arkansas that all have mamas and babies together, and it's specifically set up for moms and babies. There are houses where there are kids. There's houses where there's not kids. The houses that we have range from about 5 women to 8 women. We don't ever want to go over 8 women, which we have. Again, right? You don't go over 8 women unless there's a 9th woman that's standing at the door and it's 25 degrees and you're like, well, guess what? We have 9 women. But we don't go over 8 women. That's what I'm trying to say. And the houses are arranged, it's just like a house. There's only one house that we have that's not like a house, and that's the one that we built as the community house. So it's very small rooms. Again, this is all such old school stuff. It's really the way that people, lived in community for hundreds and hundreds of years. So small bedrooms, big living room and kitchen, and an interior garden to visit in. And we built it on purpose that way so we would have gathering spaces. So there's 8 women in that house, but there's large others. There's 2 other really, really large spaces and a library. The other houses are just like anybody's house, 3, 4 bedrooms. People who have more seniority are going to take a single room. People who don't will take, will have to bunk up. If there's 3 bedrooms and 5 women, some people are going to share. And then everybody does it like, ritual's a big thing for us. And usually the rituals are around lighting a candle in the morning. It could be reading something from the 12-step recovery books. It could be reading something from the communal life that we have established at Thistle Farms, the 24 spiritual principles. It could be just a check-in. It's just like every morning at 8:30 before everybody goes to work, we do a check-in. Are you okay? Are you okay? And people, know each other and they tell each other. Some people will take turns making dinners, but the main thing is we have several community gatherings in the week and everybody comes together. So Monday afternoons, everybody's together.
All of the houses.
All the houses. Everybody is together. Wednesday mornings is our big circle. Everybody is together. I mean, that means, like, I don't care if you are a part-time van driver. I don't care if you came out of prison yesterday or you're 20 years in. You come to the circle. On Wednesday morning, you come to the circle. And over the years, what you see is people come to the circle and somebody's died and everybody comes to the circle. Somebody just got married, everybody comes to the circle. And that ritual really does take on depth and meaning. So in all the inconsistencies, always lighting the candle and being together in the circle again grounds us.
Do you ever do Christian worship in the houses?
Mm-mm. I haven't. I'm sure it happens.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, I know it happens. What am I saying? I know that, what does that mean, prayer?
I don't know.
Well, definitely people have been praying. But, not formalized Christian worship, no.
Do they think of you as a priest? Is that a part of their understanding of who you are?
You know what? It's really funny. I think sometimes people think I'm a priest and people don't think I'm a priest. Or I don't know that people know that I'm a priest and they think I am. I think it's interesting. I don't think about it that much, but I know that when we went to Greece and we were in the refugee camp for a week, at the end of the week, the women that we were weaving with and had brought together, somehow it came out like day 6 that I was a priest, and they were like, oh, it's a priest! And I think they thought I was just a weaver, right? And I am just a weaver, and I also, I'm also ordained, but I don't think about it that much, but I think it is funny that sometimes you think somebody would know, like, I'm over here doing this thing, and this, like, they don't know. But I think that for some of the women, it's a big, big turnoff to think there's a priest that is the head of an organization that's working with women who are coming off the streets. That would be really scary and a big problem. And that was part of the reason I didn't want it ever to be a faith-based organization was because of that, where you're imposing something on someone, but also because specifically my sexual abuse started in a church, that I get very, very nervous when people in any way use religious authority to say, here's what goods and services we offer. Not that it's not a huge part of our life and a huge part of our witness, but not making it part of the bargaining. And so, I know Clemmy tells the story of like when her parole officer said, there's this priest that runs this house for prostitutes. And Clemmy was like, well, I ain't going. And Clemmy had been on the street since she was about 13. And when she came in and we met and we talked, and she was like, you're for real a priest? And I was like, yes. She's like, why are you wearing cutoff shorts and a T-shirt? That was her first question, like you had to wear an outfit. And then it was like, what is expected of me? Like she was very, very scared of it. And it was like, finally when we were able just to talk as human beings and say, we just want the same thing. Let's just work together and see how it goes. That there was no requirement of that for anybody. I would never, and I don't want that ever. So no, there's no formalized Christian worship in the houses. People go to all kinds of churches for that. People go to synagogues. We have people who just go to the rooms, and that means the 12-step rooms. They just go to the rooms, and that's their church.
Advise divinity students, what should they be doing during this time? What should they be thinking about if their life is going to be about justice work?
Don't cut yourselves short. Don't sell yourself short in any way on what your ideals are about justice. You don't have to compromise on that stuff. You can form communities that work within that framework for you, and to be a part of communities that celebrate that in you. There's not a one cookie cutter model. You'll know this about how church and life is supposed to be lived. And so I wouldn't start off with saying I'm going to just compromise. I would say, compromise other things so you can hold up the ideals. You might not need some other things so that you can live into those really beautiful ideals and see how far that carries you. And that way you're true to what the calling was to begin with. And then the other thing is stay practical. Don't get so theoretical that you lose your way. This world needs you desperately. It needs beautiful, beautiful, thoughtful minds that can help people live in a practical way towards that healing. Here's what you can do today. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it feels like. Here's what it sounds like. Here's where you can help put your, economic and spiritual value. People need practical ways of doing that, so don't get so far out there you can't remember. Yes?
Was there ever a time?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, then how did you get it? So the time I'm asking specifically is, was there ever a time where you had this vision or had this idea of what you wanted to do or to create, but maybe didn't have the confidence in yourself to do it, to bring it to
Or the backing of it.
exactly?
Yeah, I have one of those right now. I'm going through that right now.
How do you do it? How do you take that first step?
You just, what I do is I keep saying, I don't give up on anything. So I really want to start a justice enterprise. Abby knows this, in Benin City, Nigeria, where 9 out of the 10 girls trafficked out of Nigeria come from that place. And there's a beautiful woman doing work there. She's really struggling. She cannot get a justice enterprise off the ground so that when young girls return who are basically not able to get work, can't go back to school, shunned by families, all that kind of stuff, what they can do. And I have great ideas around it. I won't go into it. Great ideas, I think. And to a person at Thistle Farms, this is not the right time to do that. We are stretched thin. We've just started that project in Greece. We have some commitments in Mexico. We can't do it. And so what I have to do is also listen to the wisdom of the circle and trust the wisdom in the room and say, that's probably right. And as much as I want to go this summer and go do that, I'm not. I'm waiting. And so I'm trying to be gracious about it and trying to also save face and say it's a postponement. I'm not giving it up, but it's definitely a postponement, and do it with some grace, and so that I can keep my community close to me and that they know that they can say no to me too, that we have that relationship, if that helps. Yeah.
Early on, you mentioned that many churches have difficulty conceiving operating as a business or interacting with business. And I wondered.
I think they act like a business. I don't think they go to the marketplace as a business.
And so one thing I was thinking about this, your values, your core values are love and healing, right? Mm-hmm. And as we have an organization, Thistle Farms, that helps support that mission. And but any organization, people is going to have to take on additional values and different things to make it function properly.
Absolutely.
If the people who you're serving, the community you're serving, these are people who have difficulty
Well, the women are the organization, so that's not a separate entity. And it's not like Thistle Farms is run by another group. The leadership positions are taken by graduates of the program. So the head of sales, the national head of sales is a graduate. The head of the front of the cafe is a graduate. The head of logistics is a graduate. The head of banking is a graduate. The head of, what's that thing called? Case management, is a graduate. People go back to college. People do amazing things and do this work as their life, and they form the community. And I think that's critical, that I'm not just talking community on paper, but really there's a group of people that make decisions for the organization and impose it on survivors. That it's survivor-led on purpose. And that we have to do more and more work on that, obviously. But that's very, very important to me, that we never have a meeting that's a big decision-making meeting without women in the room who have gone through the 2-year program. The head of the national outreach, the woman I talked about this morning, Regina, she's one of the very first graduates. Anyway, all that to say that it's formed by people who have gone through this process. It is formed by the people who have gone through this process, and that process was formed by the very first women who came in. So when we started out, there was 5 women and myself, and we sat in a circle, and we drew a body. A woman's body, just an outline of a body, and said, everything we want in this house, let's draw in the body. Everything we don't, let's draw outside the body. And the body's going to represent the house. And so if we did that tonight, it would be the same words. We want peace, love, and harmony in the house. We want drugs, violence, abuse outside the house. So how do we keep those words in the house, and how do we keep those words outside the house? Let's form it. Let's figure it out together, and then just grow from there. And that's, truly, that helps form everything else in our community and how the company is run and how we understand the nature of the mission. So a woman that comes in, she begins to help form what it looks like for the next woman. The old model of radical hospitality is the newest person is the most honored guest. So if all of us in this room are saying the newest next student is going to be the honored one among us, and we're going to show the greatest hospitality, and we're going to bake a dinner and, get out the greatest clothes and lay it out thick for them and say, what can we do? We could all get together and focus on that person. And once you keep doing that, it really helps ground everybody else. That's probably not a good answer, sorry.
Brandon.
One of the things I thought was so powerful about that video was just seeing all the graduates and thinking about all the stories that are different than otherwise. But I'm also wondering too about the those who maybe don't get through the program successfully, maybe those who relapse or for whatever reason leave. That has to be incredibly painful, particularly if these communities are getting close and we've got a small group of people in the house. Could you just talk a little bit about what that's like how the healing of that hurt happens, and then also whether second chances are possible, and how that works.
So one of our core principles is that the door is never closed. It may be getting really narrow to get back through it after a while, but there's second chances for sure. And for some people, a relapse is part of a journey of recovery. And the truth of our community is that women relapse over a relationship before they ever relapse over a drug. It's not 100% addicted women either to drugs. But you do it, you get out to the streets early enough and are trafficked or prostituted or whatever enough, you definitely get a drug addiction at some point, almost always. Anyway, about a little bit more than 80% of the women who come into the community graduate 2 years later. So it's a little bit less now than 20% of the women don't make it through for a number of reasons. And it's awful. I don't know how to talk about it except it's awful. And we stick together and, we've identified a woman by just the sleeve of her tattoo. She OD'd in a hotel, and was beaten so severely you couldn't recognize, nobody could identify her. Women who have gone back out on the streets. Early on, there was a woman who went back on the streets and went to a truck stop and was put in a cab of a truck and tortured for about 4 hours and shot execution style. We have, all kinds of stories like that. And every time it seems like you think, well, this is the worst it gets, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't, and it's rare and far in between. But it is heartbreaking. But it's also it kind of fires you up to keep going. Like, we are in a life and death situation, and it is so violent, and the drugs are so bad, so bad that we just gotta keep going. Mm-hmm. But it affects everybody, and we talk about it for sure. One more question?
Mm-hmm. One more question?
It's
Yeah.
better be, whoever, wait, let's just make some parameters around
Okay.
this question.
Yeah.
Part of your question has to be a question about at least one of the products we sell.
My question to follow this was, how do we become customers?
There you go. Okay. Then that covers it.
I was going to ask about what it means to be a thistle farmer, and specifically about how the thistles and the relationship between the women and the actual plants, how that comes into the offer that you give.
That's such a great softball last question. No, but it's easy. We were, going down to the alleys where the women were walking and sleeping and turning tricks, and going into the prison to meet women. And I noticed that the only flower left was thistles. That was all that was left in those places. Like, you could walk into the prison and there'd be a thistle climbing up through the barbed wire fence. It was like, damn, that's powerful. And, when we went to Rwanda to visit the women the very first time, we went to the memorial where 258,000 people are buried. And out of those rocks they laid over those bodies, there was a thistle growing. We had the flood in Tennessee, and we had bought our first manufacturing facility the week before, and the whole thing flooded, and it was the whole parking lot was mud. And not the parking lot, the empty lot next to our building was mud, and there was a thistle growing out of it. So drought, flood, massacre, prison, alleys, this thing grows. And I thought it seemed like a pretty good flower to pick, that it has a history of survival by brutality, has a soft, beautiful, deep purple center. What a great symbol for how we all are. Just like, touch me wrong and watch my prickles come out. But I have got such a soft center, like all of us, this period and place in us. And what I didn't know then, but I know now, is that, we started picking it and harvesting it and making paper out of it. And thistles are really, really healing, especially for women who have been on the streets. It's all about, if you went, and got thistle extract, it's about detoxifying, restoring your liver, and about balance after trauma. That's what people have used thistles for 1,000 years. No idea. Just slid right into that theological gem. Sometimes, you just get lucky. You were asking?
I was. So there's a table with books.
Yes.
And then next to that, you brought some
samples.
Is it possible to buy things from Thistle Farms?
It is possible. What a great question, Bill. And really, we are so happy to start sharing this story and becoming part of Yale's story, and having Yale become part of our story. That is huge for us. Huge. And we hope that this is an ongoing relationship. And it probably takes, 3 clicks to become a customer at Thistle Farms. Just go on the website and see everything is all natural. It's perfect. It is how we make our way. We broke the $3 million mark in sales. I don't mean in total. I mean for the annual sales. That's way up, isn't it, Ben?
It is.
He was back there in the early days. So, and we're just growing. We're in every Whole Food store around the country. What we want people to do is like, think of us. That's all we're asking. You don't have to do anything but think of us and see where that leads. If that means that you at some point want to be a social media advocate on something we're doing, that would be awesome. You know, if you want to think of us when you're buying a present for someone, if you want to maybe put some soaps in the divinity school.
I think they're in the bookstore, aren't they?
I'm talking about in your bathroom.
Oh, yes, yes.
I'm talking about buying them, Bill. See, you cannot be afraid to ask. Just soap. That's all we're asking. Maybe a candle on your altar, but to really encourage people to put some value where they really do have value, and to say, these are products we can buy into and can support. You are going to buy soap. You are going to buy, a candle at some point. Just think of us. That's all we're saying. And then maybe throw out a good thought or a prayer, too. We need it. We have a beautiful community, but it's pretty fragile.
We're grateful for you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.